bringing smiles to the world. We're hitting first base. Marty Lurie with friends. Home run, you know the ways and the trends, the stories all with the match of the block. It's Marty and friends. Marty and friends.
Very good.
Great to have you with us this morning. Something new for us and doing a pregame. Giants and the Brewers coming up at 12:45, and they go to get another series win. So we're joined today by some Bay Area icons, I will tell you that. And one is Bruce Jenkins, of course, from the Chronicle, longtime baseball writer, sports writer, and a basketball writer, too. I can't wait to talk to him about that. And then the Bay Area icon of radio sports, and for so many years, it all happened because of this guy, and that is Tony Salvador. So, Tony, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, gents. How are you?
Good.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, pretty good. Well, let's start with the Giants. Number one. Come on, they're what are they? 16-10, something like that.
16-9.
16-9 right now, and they got a chance to beat the Brewers. And Bruce, will start with you. Every time you think they're in trouble, somehow the other team makes a mistake and they get out of it and they keep winning.
Yeah, well, I thought the story last night was the way it finished. I mean, Walker's out there. He's the closer. He's been established at the closer. Just a couple of weeks ago, Doval was kind of almost in the doghouse. He blew a big lead. He didn't look good doing it. And you're wondering, is he even going to be on the team at the trading deadline? But this is the beauty of Bob Melvin and not necessarily going by the analytics and the numbers. Walker was hit hard. He wasn't on, and Doval had shown signs that he had a slider previously. And sure enough, he goes out there and shuts the door. That was a magnificent development.
Yeah, Tony, what do you think about the bullpen right now?
Yeah, well, that's the big problem because as Bruce said, we were all under the assumption that we had Walker and he was going to be our guy, and Doval was a mess. And as Bruce also mentioned, the trade thing was coming up and there was talk about it. And all of a sudden, in the last two games, Walker goes off the shelf. I mean, what the hell? Now, somebody wrote in one of our texts, Marty, that's baseball. And it might have been you because that is baseball. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, it's not a problem yet because Walker's still throwing the ball hard. It's just not going where he wants it to go. He's hitting people. It's all over the place. But the stuff is there. Doval worries me because he won't throw a fastball. The guy is slider crazy. The only pitch he has confidence in is a slider. And he did it last night. He came in and threw great sliders and got out of trouble. Then finally, when he got 0-2 down to get the last out, then he threw a fastball. And he finally threw one, and he got the out. He got the ground ball to second, and that was the end of the game. And then he was all smiles again. So let's see where this goes with him. But let's talk about the Brewers a little bit. Come on, man. You got to play defense at some point. They're handing the games to the Giants just about every night they beat them. They did it in the first game. They kicked the ball all over the place. And last night, they could have gotten out of trouble and they kicked it all over the place again. What do you think about the Brewers, Bruce?
Well, that's very uncharacteristic of them. That's not the team we've seen in recent years. They haven't been a terribly attractive team to watch, but they play really well and they're always right there. And, I don't know if this lasts or not, but it's disturbing to open the season that way. And the Giants have kind of been the flip side of that. I mean, they've made some tremendous defensive plays. They've got absolute mainstays on defense, they've proven reputations, and it's really going to help them. But, the Brewers, again, I don't see this turning into a long comedy act for the season, but it's not a good way to start.
No, the Brewers, I think they're in some trouble. Now, they go to Tobias Myers today, and, he's 26 years old, and I was just looking him up. He was a Giant at one point. He's been with the Brewers, the Giants, Tampa Bay, the Orioles, and the White Sox. He's what you
Who
call
hasn't been a Giant at one time?
Yeah, that's
When
right.
Tara was, I mean, it's amazing.
he's what you call a scout killer. This is what a shooting once taught me this. The guy has got so many tools that everyone says, let me get him. I'll fix him. And last year he wasn't bad. He was a right-hander. The Giants saw him a little bit. Chapman got him for a home run, but he's not bad. And he goes against Roop today, so that's the matchup. But I want to talk a little bit more about the Giants and the team we're watching. And I go to Patrick Bailey. And I was thinking about it today. I mean, really, first of all, he gets a million calls. These umpires, every time this guy's catching, he pulls the ball in, gets calls all the time, right? But hitting, can you go through a whole season, Bruce, with a catcher who hits 160 and win a pennant?
I can't recall that ever happening. Anywhere under 200. It's usually a guy who can drive in a few runs, do something, not be hopeless, and he's a switch hitter in his utility. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. I mean, just in terms of the Giants in general, they're not going to win the pennant, but they need whatever pluses they have. They're going to champion. Bailey's defense is one of them. Matt Chapman's defense is one of them, and of course he does hit a little bit. But you take what you can get. You don't replace him. Who do they replace him with?
Nobody. Yeah. And the one. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just going to say, the Giants, it's endemic. The Mendoza line seems to be a large part of what's going on with the Giants. That's why it's so amazing that we're 16-9. I mean, led by Ward. I mean, what the hell is he batting? 9.94094. I mean, it's an embarrassment. I don't know how the hell, but talking about Bailey, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like you said, I don't think we can we get through a season with a guy batting 160? I just don't know.
Well, let's say he gets hot and he's hitting 210.
Right.
It's all right.
Well, I agree with you. 210 would be unbelievable.
I'm thinking back, and I'm thinking of pennant winners, right? And we love to do this, and you go back with all the pennant winners and Bruce teams you covered, and Carlton Fisk gets in there, and Johnny Bench gets in there, and people like that. I thought of Elston Howard when he went to the Red Sox in 1967. He couldn't do anything, but he caught that staff and got them to an American League pennant. He's about the only one I could think of that could hit that poorly and still be an everyday catcher.
Yeah.
Plus, he had a hell of a history as a hitter. He was a very good hitter for the Yankees, and they always believed that would come back. But for Bailey, I just think forget trying to leave the yard or hit one up the gap. Just focus on making contact. Be smart. 2 strikes especially. Shorten up everything. Just make some contact. Try and get yourself out of this thing. Spank a couple base hits up the middle. Get some confidence. I don't think he's certainly not a 160 hitter. He's never been that. But the 210 would be nice.
Yeah, they may have to deal with it at some point. And let's go to the other side and Rick Smith's guy, Flores. I mean, Flores is unbelievable. Come on, the guy has 27 RBIs. He's got more RBIs in 25 games than Mays and McCovey and Matt Williams. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Everybody but Mel Ott is on.
Kelly's in there somewhere.
Is on the list. But how about Flores and what he's doing, Tone?
Oh, it's just unbelievable. And he did it again last night. I mean, just absolutely amazing, and here's a guy now, as the story goes, and as you guys know, he, was hurt last year. And the whole idea was that, as it's been told, he couldn't dig in. And, and this year he comes back and he's healthy. And it starts off with him, the word is that he's going to be back to his normal self. Well, who the hell knew he was going to be back to where he is now? I agree. I mean, I love your I love your announce. He's better than anybody but Mel Ott. Fabulous.
Really, I mean, he has carried the team.
Yeah.
Where would the team be without Flores and Jung-Hoo Lee at this particular time?
Well, that's the other one is Lee. And I've said this, Bruce, you and I have talked about this since we saw him play. This guy is going to lead the league in hitting. I'm firmly convinced. He just slaps the ball around.
301 should do it.
I'm telling you, he's 330, but carrying this team when he gets up, and you always say when they flip the lineup, you like to see who's coming up, and you want to watch. When you know this guy is coming up, and the Giants have a rally going, it's trouble for the other team. I've
never missed one of his at bats, even in spring training, and he seems to do something every night. He's doing something. He's hitting the ball down both lines. He'll drive the ball deep. He's a good fielder. He's got charisma. A tremendous pickup for them. And just one thing about Flores, I love about Flores, he's got a wicked dead pull stroke, and he kind of leans into it. He's yanking him out of the park down the left field line, but he's going to right field consistently, which is why he's leading the league in RBIs and why he's carrying the team. I mean, the guy, he's always thinking team, the situation, thinking his way through it, and bang, there's another hit to right.
All right. Well, we're joined by one of the great baseball players of all time.
Dave Rose.
See him, but we love him.
Right.
Bill Madden. And Bill, it's wonderful to have you with Tony Salvatore, who is the icon of Bay Area radio. We wouldn't be where we are today without Tony. And, of course, Bruce. So good to have you with us. You made it.
Yes, I'm glad to finally get to be with you guys after technical difficulties.
All right. Very good. Well, since we have you on, and one of the main reasons was to catch up with you a little bit, you have a new book out, and I'm going to hold it up for the audience. Of course, Bill is I think, one of the best writers I'm ever going to read about baseball, a baseball memoir by Bill Madden. And I'll show you the book right there. And Bill, how is the book going, and why this book now?
Well, as far as I know, it's going pretty good. It's getting a lot of attention. It's kind of a little bit of a different book. The actual title is Yankees, Typewriters, Scandals, and Cooperstown, a baseball memoir. It's a long title, but it kind of tells you that this is an all-encompassing book. The Triumph editors are kind of promoting it as an inside history of baseball over the last 50 years by the guy who was right in the middle of all of it. That would be me. And then it's also a kind of a history of newspapers and sports writing, which obviously I have also been a big part of. Unfortunately, it's kind of as Bruce will attest, it's a diminishing business. But I was glad to have been a big part of it in the highlight of the newspaper business.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted Tony with us today is, one of your mentors, and you have a couple. One is Milton Richmond, very famous, and his brother Arthur Richmond I got to meet when he was part of the Yankees. But the other one is Dick Young, and it touches me because I grew up in Brooklyn, and my job as a kid was to go to the candy store in the morning and get a copy of the New York Mirror and the Daily News. That was my family. That's what we read, and that was my job. And I couldn't wait to read what Dick Young had to say about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And Tony, growing up in New York, I thought would appreciate it as well, and Bruce too. So tell us a little bit about Dick Young and some of the mentorship that got you into sports writing.
Well, my father weaned me on newspapers and baseball when I was a young kid. And at that time, there were 7 major newspapers in New York.
Imagine that.
7.
Right. And we had the New York Herald Tribune delivered to our house.
Yeah.
And my father weaned me on that paper, especially the great Red Smith he said, you got to read Red Smith every day. And I did. and they had another Hall of Fame baseball writer named Tommy Holmes, who covered, I believe he covered the Dodgers.
Yes.
And then Harold Rosenthal, who was a dear friend of mine, covered the Yankees. But anyway, the Daily News at that time was another morning paper, and my father would not give it room in our house. He thought it was a scandal rag, and it was not allowed in our house. Unfortunately for my father, though, he owned a plumbing supply company in Hackensack, New Jersey. And every day the plumbers all came in with the Daily News, and they would leave it on the counter in there but they would all be debating over baseball and talking about, in particular, Dick Young. And one of my father's main plumbers was a guy named Charlie Hulley, who happened to be the next door neighbor of Dick Young in Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey. And every day he would tell my father, Charlie, you got to read Dick Young. You got to read him today. Nobody is better than him. And so my father would start reading Dick Young, and he grudgingly admitted, this guy, he's on top of everything. And then the strangest thing happened. My father bought me an Olympic typewriter when I was about, I guess 13, 14 years old. And I used that typewriter to write my own stories on it. And every year I would do a baseball preview. And I would get all of my information out of the newspapers, and in particular the sporting news, which I also read religiously. And so one year, I had written my annual baseball preview, and my father asked Charlie Hulley if I could bring it to Dick Young, if he would bring it to Dick Young and have him look at it. And he arranged us to go to Dick Young said he could tell him to bring him over to my house. So we went to Dick house, and I brought my little preview thing with me, and I'm standing there, and Dick Young is looking over this thing, and I'm like a nervous kid. And finally he looks up and he said, "Not bad, kid, keep at it." We drove home. My father was in seventh heaven. He could not believe it. He says, "Dick Young liked your story." And then the irony of ironies, 20 years later, I wind up getting hired at the Daily News by none other than Dick Young.
Dick Young. That's a great story.
Well, you've got a great piece in there about Dick Young. Would tell people you're not Ernest Hemingway, okay? Write for the people. Jim Murray said the same thing. You're writing for truck drivers. You're writing for the plumbers. These are the people you're writing for.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you were the same way, Bill. I mean, you told the story with a lot of conviction, but it wasn't too fancy or flowery. You got it the hell out there, and you made your point, and it made sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was the lesson of Dick Young.
Yeah. You know what? Let me jump in.
Tell your readers something they don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Let me jump in here for a second. I'm like Marty. My dad sent me to the corner, store to get the Daily Mirror and the Daily News every morning. Okay. And Bill, you would remember this. When this was during the days when the Daily News used to have a kind of a headline above their, almost on the top of the page, Daily News, and it would say, "The Daily News, more than twice the circulation of any other paper in America." You remember that?
Oh yeah, and it was.
Yeah, it was.
And I
always, it was.
People ask me why I had such a relationship with Steinbrenner. And I didn't have, I was like everybody else. You were hot and cold with Steinbrenner. But people ask me why, on occasion, Steinbrenner would call me or whatever. And I said, George was no dummy. He knew that he may not. I remember at one point George said, "You know why I talk to you, Madden, because you're balanced. Some of these other guys in this town, they're not so balanced, and they're not." I never took that as being some special guy in the eyes of Steinbrenner. I took it to mean that George was no dummy. The Daily News had a circulation of 2 million people a day, more than any of the other papers, and he knew where to go to get the most bang for his buck. Yeah, and that was the only reason he would return my calls.
Yeah. In fact, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, and because I read Young every day when I was a kid. I'm 81 years old. I noted that you were in your biography. You're 79.
About that.
Okay.
Right.
Anyway, well, you don't want to tell your age. Is that where
Right.
we're going with this? Anyway, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the name of his column was Young Ideas.
Yep, that was
Yep.
it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I remembered that correctly. Read them every day.
I don't know where that came from, but towards the latter part of his Dick's life, he was not considered a young person's
Well, that's for sure.
writer. I mean,
That's for
Young
sure.
Ideas. He was not Young Ideas at the end of his career.
That is for damn sure.
You developed a good relationship with so many of the big players, and Tom Seaver is one. DiMaggio, your DiMaggio stories are great. Tony's got DiMaggio stories too.
Yeah.
How did you get connected to people like that where they could trust you?
Well, in Joe's case, I got to be very good friends with him late in his life. And there's a whole segment about Joe in my book, especially at the end of his life. But I was also deeply involved in the baseball memorabilia industry. In fact, there's a whole chapter in the book about my business in the baseball card business, and the fact that I worked for Donruss, one of the baseball card companies, and I was their major domo, so to speak, for about 8 years. So I was deeply involved in all of that craze in the 80s with the card shows that popped up all over the place, and card stores, baseball card stores. And of course, DiMaggio was also deeply involved as far as one of the top earners of the old time players in these at these card shows, signing autographs. And I met Joe. I got to know Joe through Barry Halper, who was a famous collector of everything baseball. And Halper was also a limited partner in the Yankees. And he and Joe were very good friends. And Joe liked to bring Barry and I along with him to these card shows because he didn't trust anybody. And he wanted to make sure that nobody was sneaking extra items in front of him and things like this. And so he came to not just like me, but he trusted me. And we became, pretty good friends. And as I talk about in the book, I would have never, Joe, if you were Joe's friend only until he thought maybe you were trying to make money off him, and then you were no longer Joe's friend. Mm-hmm. This happened to almost everybody, including Barry Halper, who became into Joe's realm, so to speak. And the irony of all this was because at the end of Joe's life, he turned all of his financial interests over to this litigious lawyer down in Miami named Morris Engelberg. And it was a really sad thing to see happen because Joe never trusted anybody. And then he wound up being almost held captive by this guy, Morris Engelberg, after he developed lung cancer. And he was in a hospital down there that Morris had control over the hospital and everything else. And none of Joe's friends, including his brother Dom, was able to get at one point was able to even get to reach Joe or anything like that. And as I talk about in the book, Morris kept putting out these daily bulletins, so to speak, that Joe's doing great. He's looking forward to opening day, and it was nothing close to being what the truth was. Oh. And I got a call one day from Richard Ben Kramer. Do you guys remember him?
Sure.
He was a great writer. He won the Pulitzer Prize for his book on Clinton. And he was at that point, he was working on what I think is the definitive Joe DiMaggio biography. It was called A Hero's Life. And Kramer calls me and he said, look, I got something for you. I can't use it because I'm doing a book and I'm not on deadline, and this is going to be old news by the time. But you've been helpful to me because I had helped him as far as Joe's involvement with all the card shows and stuff. And Kramer there's a whole big part of that in his book. And he said, I'm just going to let you know this. Joe is dying. Don't believe anything Morris is saying. He's dying. I said, how do you know this, Richard? And he said, I got a nurse that's right there in a hospital with him every day. Mm. And so I I said, well, is there anybody else who knows about this? He says, yeah, call Jerry Remote. Jerry Remote was a big time promoter and memorabilia guy from Chicago. He did a lot of deals with Joe and signed bats and everything else. He says, call Jerry Remote. So I called Jerry Remote, and he said to me, he says, Richard is right. He says, Joe is hooked up on tubes. He's got lung cancer. It's terminal. He's got maybe weeks to live. It's all over for him. So I went to my editor at the Daily News, and I said, this is what I got. I said, all this stuff from Morris Engelberg is total BS. I said, Joe's dying, and, I have this exclusively. And she said, okay. She calls the editor of the paper, Debbie Krennick, and she tells him, she says, you want to hold page 1 for this. We got a big story coming. And so Krennick says to her, well, I have to, Morris, we have to run everything here regarding DiMaggio past this guy, Rock Positano, who's a foot doctor. He was a foot doctor to the publisher of our paper, Mort Zuckerman. And apparently this guy, Rock Positano, had told Zuckerman, I'm buddies with Joe and I got everything. Bottom line was, she comes back to us an hour later and she says, we're killing your story.
Yeah.
And Terry Thompson, my boss, said, killing the story? Why? And she says, Rock Positano said there's nothing wrong with DiMaggio. He's just it's a minor thing. He's down. He's going to be fine. He's not dying. And we can't use the story. And so I told Barry Halper this. I said, well, Barry actually called me and he says, well, are you running the story? And I said, no, believe it or not, that Rock Positano said it's not true. So Barry said, well, I was just at the Friars Club, and at the Friars Club, I was talking to Marvin Scott, who was he was the WPIX news top news guy over there, and he said Marvin told me he heard DiMaggio's dying. He's going to run with it tonight. I said, well, how did he know that? He says, I don't know how he knew it, but he's running with it tonight. So I turned on the TV a couple hours later, and sure enough, there's Marvin Scott with an exclusive that Joe DiMaggio is dying.
Wow.
So anyway,
yeah, the whole story
all part of the newspaper business.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, Billy tells a great DiMaggio story in his book. It's late in life for DiMaggio, and Bill winds up in a car with Joe, driving from New Jersey to Cooperstown. And this is how much Joe had faith in Bill. You put any other writer in that car, DiMaggio probably wouldn't say anything the whole 4 hours. But Bill's in the car, and Joe starts talking about his playing days. He's talking about 1937. He's in the RBI race with Hank Greenberg. They're at Yankee Stadium playing the Red Sox, and Joe hits a couple of just titanic rockets, 445 feet to left center. Well, that's 457 to left center. There's a sign that tells you it's 457. So not only did they not leave the park, they were hauled in by his brother. Playing center field for the Red Sox.
And he wouldn't talk to him that night.
Yeah. He told me, he says, Dom came over to dinner that night, and I never said a word to him.
Yeah.
The book is full of great.
Tony, you got Joe DiMaggio stories.
My dad told me this. This is really great when Joe D. and I will tell you that DiMaggio was his favorite player. Now, not only because he was a great player, but there's something else to this, and it'll ring true during these days. And this is in the 40s and 50s. He loved them not only because he was a Yankee fan. Okay, the Bombers, of course, he always called them the Bombers, and but he loved them for his play, but also because he was Italian. Okay, and that was a big plus for him. But he told me this story during his 54. It was a 56 or 54 game hitting streak.
56.
54 or 56.
56.
56. Yeah.
56 games.
He told me. My father worked on the railroad. And, just working all day. They wouldn't have a radio there. But he said as soon as he got out of the thing, like out of work at like 4 o'clock. And as you guys know, most of the Yankee games were played during the day. And so by that time, most of the games were over. And he said as soon as they walked out, you know, they'd run into somebody, they'd go into a bar for a drink, and they'd say, "Did he get one?" That was all he had to say. Did he get one? And it came back affirmative 56 times. But he loved Joe D. And I met him at a bar in San Francisco. It was right up from, I ran a radio station at Green Street in San Francisco, and there was a bar up there. It was a friend of his. Bruce, you may remember the name of the place. I don't right now. But anyway, it was a place that Joe always he went to a lot because he was a friend of this guy. It was another Italian guy who owned the place.
Yeah.
And I knew the owner, and the whole thing about when Joe was there, he sat at the end of the bar, and the whole deal was, don't bother him, don't approach him, whatever. Okay. But I got to know the bartender or the bar owner, and he knew I was in the radio business, and he introduced me to him, which was a great honor, to talk to him as well. So, and one other Joe D story. And Marty knows this one as well. A good friend of mine and Marty's, two guys actually. I was at the place, the restaurant near the old Seal Stadium.
Double play?
Yeah, Double Play. I'm at the Double Play having lunch with a buddy of mine. Okay, and I look over, and across the room, there's Joe DiMaggio with a friend of mine and another guy. I didn't know the other guy then. It was Rick Smith. Okay. Marty knows him very well. And I just thought to myself, well, the hell with this. I got to go up. I got to make an approach. So I approach the table, and I say to my friend, Bob, Bushyhead, I say to him, Bob, how are you? Great to see you. Who's your guest here? Of course, he didn't remember me from the other bar, but they tell that story now. They were so embarrassed that I would actually walk up and they introduced me. Obviously, I knew who he was, but always great stories about Joe D.
Well, the book is terrific, and it's not just everyday stories. First and third, and the guy hit a double, and that kind of stuff. It's really the inside. Bill Madden talking about the newspaper business and baseball and the things that happened. And the one thing I liked was your story about your first game that Bill that you went to, and Tony can relate to this, and Bruce and I can relate as well. Talk about that one. It's in the book.
You mean as a kid?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was in 5th grade at the time, and I was getting ready to go to school, and my father comes in. I was getting dressed for school, and my father comes in my bedroom, and he says, you're going to have a short day at school today. I said, how come? What's going on? He said, we're going to the World Series. I said, really? This was October 8th, 1956. The date might be familiar to you. So anyway, I said, no kidding. I said, yeah, my father, he says, I got a couple of tickets and we're going. We'll be picking you up around 10 o'clock at school. So my father and I go over to Yankee Stadium, and sure enough, it turned out to be Don Larson's perfect game. And it was,
Oh my God.
And as I write in the book, my father was so excited. He said, we're all going to be famous. We were at this game and everything else. And he said, you'll never be at another game like this one.
Yeah.
And as I write in the book, well, as a matter of fact, I was. In 1998, I'm sitting in the same press box. Well, actually, it was the second Yankee Stadium press box. I'm sitting in that press box, and I'm watching David Wells, who went to the same high school as Don Larson, and he's also pitching a perfect game at Yankee Stadium. And there was another, Dick Young is involved in this story too, because the famous story when Joe Trimble was the Yankee beat writer, when Larson completed the perfect game, he froze and he didn't know what to write. And he turned to Young. He says, Dick, I don't know what to write. And Young turned without batting an eye. He says, the imperfect man pitched the perfect game. And that was Trimble's lead that day. And he forever got credit for it. And so I'm thinking, I'm sitting here in this press box. My father has got to be looking over me. Dick Young is somewhere around here as well, and Wells is pitching this perfect game, and it was just the most unbelievable deja vu day of my entire life.
Yeah.
Right. The book is terrific. Bruce or Tony, you got a question for Bill, and I'm happy to ask one if you don't.
Well, I just I love what Bill writes about analytics. He takes it on very strongly, but with in tremendous detail. He doesn't just say, "Well, get off my lawn," that kind of junk. He calls the thing I like the most. He calls war the biggest analytical myth of them all, and it's basically what he's saying is people are dissecting the game on numbers and probability, and they're figuring out all these things. And you know what they're not watching is the game. They got their heads down. They're looking at their iPhone, their computer, whatever, and they're figuring things out, and they're dickering around, and the romance of baseball completely escapes them. And, if a manager wants to pinch hit for a guy who's hitting 0 for 17, but decides, you know what, I'm not going to do that now, and the guy gets a base hit, there's a romance to the game that happens every day, and it evades people who concentrate only on the numbers. Am I telling this at all right, Bill? I mean,
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the title of the chapter is "The Analytics Myth Sayers," and one of the major points I make in that chapter, and it's happening as we speak here, is this Elias, the general manager of the Orioles, who was an assistant to Jeff Luno in Houston, and Luno, of course, is the father of analytics. He's credited and Elias succeeded him in Houston, and then moved on to Baltimore, and they credit him as the new analytics guru. And I point out in the story in my book, especially in Baltimore, under his leadership in Baltimore, while the Orioles eventually, after 4 years there, won 103 games 2 years ago. And as I point out, this had nothing to do with analytics. It had nothing to do with having better formulas and better evaluations of pitchers. Especially, Elias prided himself to this day about how his people know more about pitching than the scouts do. He told the scouts that. Don't even look at pitchers. We have our own formulas. Well, we now know the Orioles are almost in last place now. And one of the reasons they're there is because they have no pitching. As I pointed out in the book, the only reason the Orioles made that great improvement is because they subjected the Baltimore fans of 4 years of tanking and finishing last. What does that got to do with anything other than how hard was that? And that's the problem we have. And, all of these analytics, part of their whole modus operandi is to start finishing last so we can get high draft picks.
Right.
Bill, what do you think about
surgeries for every pitcher?
Yeah.
What do you think about A-Rod? Because part of this, what I love about the book, and Tony, you got to get a copy of it to see it. It's really good. I'm going to hold it up again. You get into it, Mike Francesca, about A-Rod, and you were pretty tough on A-Rod. But what I like about the book is you give both sides of the argument, so to speak.
Well, yeah. I mean, we were the Daily News. We were front and center in breaking all those stories on steroids and the Bond stuff. I have to give Bruce's paper, the Chronicle. They were the ones that really broke the Bond story, the Balco scandal. But then later on, when A-Rod and all the stuff with A-Rod, we were in the forefront of breaking all the stories on A-Rod, especially his relationship with that clinic down in Miami where they were, baseball wound up busting about 13 of those players that were going in there getting steroids. But anyway, we kept writing all these stories, and I wrote many a column on it. And for some reason, Mike Francesa decided to be the lone wolf who was going to defend A-Rod. And he had me on his show one afternoon, and he said, I don't know this. He says, why are you guys being so hard on A-Rod? I said, I said, well, I'm only writing what's happening. I'm like, we're not making anything up. He says, well, you called him the Whitey Bulger of baseball. And I said, well, I have to admit that was probably a little over the top. But he was baseball's most wanted man.
Yeah.
So let's put it that way. But anyway, so we got talking about all the players that were busted in this clinic down in Miami. And he said, why are you only singling A-Rod out? I said, because A-Rod was the leader. I said, it's all there. He was the one that brought a lot of these players into that clinic. And he really didn't have anything to answer about that other than the fact that he says, well, we also mentioned the fact that when baseball had that whole thing with the anonymous testing to find out what percentage of players were actually doing steroids. I forget the year. I think it was 2003, maybe. Anyway, that list was supposedly never going to get out, but the New York Times reported that A-Rod was on it and David Ortiz was on it and some of these other people were on it. And Francesco was screaming to me, he says, how come A-Rod's the only one that was singled out on that list? And I said, he wasn't the only one singled out. He says, well, who else was? I said, David Ortiz. And he was kind of silent on that one, too. And then, unfortunately, the baseball writers voted Ortiz into the Hall of Fame a few years later. And the rest is history on that one. But
Well, plus the fact, A-Rod at that point, he was the biggest star. I mean, outside of Bonds,
yeah, he was. He was.
Yeah. So,
and then, ironically, after all of baseball, the relentless hunt to take him down, Selig left no stone unturned. They wanted him as their poster child for steroids. Yeah. Everything they did, and then of course he had his own scorched earth policy at the end when he stormed out of the hearing with the judge, with the arbitrator in New York, and he sued baseball. He sued the Players Association. He went completely crazy. And then 3 years later, what happens? They welcome him back with open arms. That's one of the faces of baseball, is the lead broadcasters on ESPN. And I read about this in the book. I said, I don't get it. And I mean, what do we do all this work on? For what? So that they can welcome this guy back?
Yeah.
Well, why do you think baseball gets away with that?
Well, first of all, Steele was gone. Manfred was now the commissioner, although Manfred was his hatchet man on the A-Rod case. He was the guy that did all the work on bringing him down. I think maybe it's TV, maybe it's ratings. I don't know. Maybe ESPN asked baseball, look, we think we can get a few more viewers if we have A-Rod on. I don't know what the answer to that was. If I were the commissioner and ESPN came to me after all I had done, all the work I had done to bring him down and all these other steroids cheats down, I would have said, are you kidding me? We're not going to approve that. But they did. So.
Well, great part of the book. Great part of the book. Tony, did you know Francesca?
I met him a couple of times. So he's Bill will tell you. I mean, he had a fucking huge, over-the-top ego, And I'm running KNBR in San Francisco, which is the number one sports station on the West Coast, and he knew it. And of course, he, well, you copied us, he was a big ego guy. But I wound up having a fairly cordial conversation with him, but it wasn't my type. So,
yeah, boy. Well, one other part of the book, again, the relationships that you talk about, if it's Barry Halper, if it's the work you did on the counterfeit uniforms, baseball cards, with Donruss. There's just so many parts of this book that I didn't know about you until I read it.
Well, that's why I wrote it, Marty.
I didn't know this stuff.
He's a champion sprinter in high school, Marty.
Yeah, come on.
Right.
Oh, how about that? Boy, there's South Carolina. Tony, listen to this. He gets a scholarship to go to South Carolina because he won a 100 and 200 yard dash in New Jersey. So he gets a scholarship to South Carolina where he runs into Frank McGuire. Remember him, Tony, the basketball coach?
Sure, sure.
And he had the New York connection to all the players, and Bill was from the area. And Frank McGuire eventually gets Bill a job in journalism. How about that?
That's great. That's great.
And that's how Bill beat Milton Richmond in the streets of Baltimore about 2 a.m. Milton was really insane.
Right.
Let's race right now. He didn't
Right.
It was
actually on Bourbon Street in New Orleans.
Oh,
at
I'm
2
sorry, New
a.m.
Orleans. I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, but and Milton always told people, because Milton prided himself in his his physical fitness and everything, and he always told people, Billy Madden's the only guy that ever beat me in a foot race, and I didn't want to tell people that, first of all, he'd had a few too many drinks that night, and he was also 50 some odd years old. But anyway, the first chapter of this book is called "It's Not What You Know," and it's about Frank McGuire, who to this day is probably one of the most important people that ever was part of my life. When I went down there on the track scholarship, by the way, I was the last white sprinter, just so you know that. People can't believe that I could run a 100-yard dash in 9.8, but
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So anyway, I got out of. I decided my sophomore year that I didn't want to run track anymore, and I really wanted to get into journalism, and which I did. And by the time I got to my senior year, I was in New York at a hockey game at Madison Square Garden, and I ran into Dana Mosley, the hockey writer from the Daily News, at a bar next to the Garden there. And I asked him, I said, how does a guy like me get a job in New York, with one of the papers in New York? And he said, don't even bother writing to the New York papers. They're not going to hire a guy out of college. You got to have more experience for them. But you should write to the wire services, because you're a guy who grew up in New York and you went to school in the South. And this is just what the wire service would be interested in, somebody who's been around all over the country. So I said, do you know anybody I should write to? And he says, write to a guy named Jack Griffin. He's the sports editor at United Press International. So before I left to go back to school, I wrote Jack Griffin a letter, basically telling him that I was hoping that maybe if anything comes up at UPI that you might consider me or whatever. And I never heard back from him. So I didn't graduate that spring because I had 4 more credits to go. So I had to go to summer school down there. And while I was at summer school, I got a job at the state paper in Columbia. And I'm sitting in the office one afternoon at the state paper, and the sports editor, Herman Helms, comes out of his office and he says, Billy, Frank McGuire's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. Now, when I was covering sports for the Gamecock, the school paper, and my primary assignment was the basketball team. At that time, there were like maybe 20 kids in the entire University of South Carolina from the New York and New Jersey area, and 9 of whom were on Frank's basketball team because he was strictly from New York. He won the 1957 national championship at North Carolina with a team of 5 kids, all from the New York area. It was one of the greatest basketball teams of all time. They beat Will Chamberlain in 3 overtimes in the championship game. Anyway, and Frank wound up coming to South Carolina, and he was there 2 years after he got there. We were already nationally ranked in basketball. So Frank was king at South Carolina. And I, being another kid from the New York area, covering the basketball team, I became one of Frank's boys. So anyway, Herman Helms comes out of his office and he says, Frank is on the phone. He wants to talk to you. And I said, this is like the equivalent of a cub reporter at the Daily News in 2001 after 9/11. And the editor-in-chief says, Rudy Giuliani is on the phone. He wants to talk to you. That's how big Frank was. Everybody's looking at me. I'm saying, he wants to talk to me? And Herman says, yeah, I don't know what he wants, but he asked for you specifically. So I get on the phone. I said, "Hi, Coach. How you doing?" And he says, "Billy, I don't have a whole lot of time here. I just got off the phone with Jack Griffin up in New York, and you got the job." I said, well, wait a minute. I said, "How did you get involved in this, Coach?" I said, "I would have told you if I was going to use you as a reference." He says, "Well, you stupid bastard. You should have used me. Don't you know that when I was coach at St. John's, Jack Griffin was my ball boy?" I said, "I don't know what to tell you." And he says, "There's nothing more to say. You better get on the phone to Griffin before he changes his mind." So I called Jack Griffin up in New York, and I said, "This is Bill Madden calling from Columbia, South Carolina. Coach McGuire said I should call you." Griffin starts laughing on the phone. He says, "Son, do you know how many letters I have from people like you stacked up right here on my desk?" He says, "I'm going through these letters this morning because we lost a guy at Newsday, and I come across yours that says University of South Carolina." And I said, "Well, this will give me a chance to call Frank. I haven't talked to him in years." So I called Frank and I asked him about you, and he said I should hire you. So I guess you're hired. Just like that. No clips, no resume, no references, nothing. I get hired at United Press International in New York because Frank McGuire in South Carolina said I should be hired.
That's unbelievable. It's a great story. Great story. Great story. Hey, gents, you got to excuse me for a moment. I'll be right back then.
Go ahead.
It's always been amazing to me how a lot of people from New York and New Jersey go to North or South Carolina, just in general, not just that one team. Writers and Scott Price and Peter Gammons. I mean, that migration always fascinated me.
Yeah.
Did stuff like this happen in the West Coast to you? I mean, these kind of stories. I mean, it seems like this is so New York. It's such sweet.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. I wouldn't start comparing it. It wouldn't even cross my mind to compare it.
Yeah, different.
Yeah, it was.
The whole thing about up here is that Northern Cali people go to UCLA just to be different, and they swear by it. And I was from there, and I went to Cal, and there's a lot of 400-mile transition there for an awful lot of us. We're always from the other place, but we wound up here.
Billy, as long as we have you on here, they're playing ball in Steinbrenner Stadium in Tampa.
Yeah.
Come on, a minor league ballpark, and we had Judge there the other day. Went into looked like a grove of trees, and they lost track of it. They couldn't see it. What's going on down there in Tampa?
Well, we have a situation in baseball now where we have 2 teams out of 30 that are playing in minor league ballparks. I would tell you right off the top, the A's situation is a disgrace to baseball. It's an absolute disgrace that they couldn't have worked something out with Oakland. I don't know what it would have been, but the fact that they're going, I think the stadium they're going to in Las Vegas sounds like a minor league stadium. It's going to be a very small stadium, but regardless of that, the situation with the Rays, I don't blame baseball for that. I mean, it was a freak of nature. Hurricanes, we had 2 hurricanes down here within the course of a week of each other, and the second one knocked the roof off the Tropicana field. And so the Rays are suddenly without a home. And they were already in the process of trying to get a new stadium built down here in St. Petersburg. And of course, when the hurricane destroyed Tropicana, all kinds of issues developed about the new stadium there, and they backed out of that deal. And I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but it's nobody's fault that they're playing in Steinbrenner Field. And thankfully, the Yankees stepped up to the plate because it's a very professional ballpark. I mean, it's got everything about that ballpark is major league quality except the size of it. And unfortunately, we don't know what's going to happen after this season. But by the way, the Rays are selling out every night over there. And
what is the seating capacity, Bill?
About 10,000.
Yeah. Well,
and
it's kind of the A's in Sacramento, same kind of thing.
Well,
don't bother.
The only thing is the Rays were only drawing about 17,000 over
right.
field. So I think what's going to happen down here is I know for a fact that Manfred has really had it with Stu Sternberg, the Rays owner. And for a lot of reasons, but mainly the other owners are unhappy with him because he gets $6 million a year in revenue sharing and another $6 million a year, 60, I'm sorry. Did I say six? $60 million in revenue sharing and another $60 million from the central fund every year. So in other words, the Rays Stu Sternberg starts off the year with $120 million in his bank without even selling a single ticket to the Rays games.
Yeah.
And baseball's sick of this. And he's not the only one. It's Pittsburgh and all these owners that are just pocketing this revenue sharing. So there's going to be a royal fight this winter about a new labor agreement. But at the same time, I think Manfred does not want to lose this market as much as the Rays have, had issues here from the day they were born as far as attendance and everything else. The attendance here is going to be in Tampa. This is really a Tampa market. It's not St. Pete. And I think they're going to wind up getting, hopefully, probably Stu's going to be forced to sell the team and we'll get a new owner, somebody who wants to build a stadium or be part of a stadium in Tampa. And that's what will happen here.
Tony has been telling me for years, his father would say about the Yanks, pitching. Do the Yanks have enough pitching?
Well, right now, no. The answer to that question is no. I mean, Garrett Cole is out for the year, and their number 2 starter, Gil, Gil, he's down at least until June with I forget what his issue is. It's not an elbow, shoulder, yeah, but it's not a serious enough thing that he's going to need surgery or anything. But he's just going to be out until June. So right now they're going with about a 3-man rotation of people that they can rely on day in and day out. And it was fortunate for them that after they lost Soto to the Mets in free agency, they took that money and invested it in Max Fried. And if they hadn't done that, they'd probably be in last place now. Max Fried has been great for them.
Yeah, Rodon has had his moments. We had him out here for a while.
Right.
So, how about Goldschmidt? What he's doing?
Goldschmidt's having a fabulous year. That was a real find for them. I don't think anybody was quite sure what they were going to get in him, but he's clearly not finished. Although people
Goldschmidt a Hall of Famer, Bruce Goldschmidt Hall of Famer.
I don't know, not necessarily. To me, it's always kind of comes at you right away. Yeah, well, of course he is, and he stood out that way, at the time, and we've all followed him. Heck of a player. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, I've got Don Mattingly, Will Clark, and Keith Hernandez way ahead of him.
Yeah. There you go, Marty.
No, Bruce is right. We got to deal with the Dodgers here, and get your take on it, Tony and Bruce and Bill. They start off 8-0. They were 8-9 since then, and already they got minor leaguers coming up to be openers for them. What's up with the Dodgers, Tony? What do you think?
Well, you know what? It's the old saying, Marty, and I think it's yours. It's baseball. They have the most expensive payroll in baseball. They have all the stars. Baseball just doesn't work that way. I mean, there's going to be ups and downs. And the great thing about baseball, as you guys know, is that when you have one of these 9 and 8 runs, you say, on one hand, based on that lineup, you say, well, how the hell can this happen? And you wake up 3 weeks from now and they've gone, 18-3. It's just the way baseball works, I mean, their talent level is just so great that it's impossible for me to believe that they're going to be anything less than a clear winner in this division. I mean, it's just impossible for me to believe that. Bruce, how do you feel about that?
And their pitching staff is never healthy.
That's true.
The season making 8 pitching changes a game. I mean, it was almost that comical. They had like two starters. They had Flaherty and Buehler, who was no great shake. Somehow they win it all. That's Dave Roberts' crowning achievement there, going through, the parade of relievers in the postseason. But now, once again, hey, great rotation. Glasnow, Dustin May, Snell. No, it's like Yamamoto. That's it.
Yeah.
Kid Sasaki is really good, but he's wild and he's very young. They got one guy you can rely on.
Yeah. Again, growing up in New York, upstate New York, incidentally, not New York City. But anyway, growing up, my father was an absolute diehard Yankee fan. And his line to myself and my brother, who was 3 years younger than me, I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan. My brother, Tom, was a New York Giants fan. So there you go. Okay. So he grew up in upstate New York, and we got three. But of course, my father was the clear winner. And his line was, "You can't beat the Yanks." So anytime that the Red Sox would make a run in the middle of June or July, we'd be all over my dad going, "Ha, ha, ha, the Sox. This is it. They're going to take them." And he'd say, "You know what, you guys, you get all nervous in June and July. Wait until September, okay?"
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was right. This is when the Yankees were just supreme,
Well, you always
So,
had that.
and in a way, I mean, it's kind of, I agree with Bruce. I mean, the Yankees during that period of time had great pitching, Rashi, Reynolds, Ford, whatever. And the Dodgers don't seem to be able to kind of pull that card trick out. I mean, they can hire all these great, expensive, great players, Mookie, whatever. Pitching's a whole different deal, So
They can't even tell you when Ohtani's going to pitch. It just gets more mysterious every day.
yeah.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah.
That's they keep prolonging this mystery, and I don't think he's ever going to pitch again. But
He may not. Yeah.
Boy.
But it's heartening for the Giants in Arizona and San Diego. I mean, this is a vulnerable team. The Cubs haven't lost to them in 4 games, and they've scored 38 runs in the process.
How about that?
It can be had, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And
They beat him the other night, 11-10. Did that go into extra innings?
I'm not sure. One of them did. One of them went 10.
that was Amaya hit the home run to tie it up in the 9th.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, they beat him 11-10.
Yeah, then Happ got the hit in the 11th. But how about this kid? How about I love baseball, and how these kids all of a sudden show up. Pete Crow Armstrong, PCA.
Yeah.
Have you watched this guy? This guy, he's a center fielder. This is like Devon White or one of these older center fielders that we remember, who covers so much ground that's dramatically different than anybody else.
Yeah.
He steals bases. He hits for power. He's a good hitter, period. He looks like he can do everything. I can't find anything wrong with the guy.
Yeah.
The hyphen's not good, but
I think.
Hey, Bill, I want to ask you a question because we talked about, your coverage of Alex and all, and steroids and all that business. There is a huge argument in this town, of course. And Bruce, I think I know what his answer is, and I know Marty's answer. We always ask about Bonds. Now, in our general opinion, we think Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. What do you think?
Well, you're asking the wrong guy.
I kind of assumed that, but I wanted to get it from the horse's mouth.
I am the number one no steroids guy is in the Hall of Fame voter. And I am a hardliner when it comes to the steroids.
Bruce?
that's quite all right. Your argument's just as strong as ours. I've always made it very, very simple. It's all about performance. If you're going to have a museum, everybody's going to be in it. There's going to be rogues and criminals and who knows murderers. But who were the best players? That's what you go to see at Cooperstown. I stop right there. I don't care what the hell happened off the field. Who were the best players who put up the numbers? They should be there. I don't love him. The Bonds is the most despicable man I ever met in any sport. Okay,
we'd all agree with that.
But I just, it's very clear cut for me. Maybe it's simplistic and dumb, but that's how I do it.
So what do you do with Pete Rose now that he's dead?
Oh, I wrote his name in for 5 years in a row. They finally said, "Will you stop doing that? Stop writing his name in, or you won't. You don't get your vote."
I think what's going to happen there is I think this whole thing with Trump's involvement in it and his meeting with Manfred, and I strongly suspect that Manfred is going to reinstate him, but that doesn't guarantee him getting in. He's still going to have to go in front of a Veterans Committee, which will be comprised of present-day Hall of Famers, and probably a couple writers will be on that committee, and a couple owners or executives will be on that committee. And so it's not a sure thing. Personally, I've gone back and forth on Rose for 20 years now. I was at first when the Hall of Fame took him off our ballot and said he wouldn't be on our ballot, even though he hadn't done anything. Nothing had been proven about it at the time. I felt, that wasn't right. I thought that the writers, we should still have the say as to whether he should be in or out. Leave it to us. And they took that away from us. So I was not happy about that. And then through the years, when Pete went all those years in denial, and lying about it, I got to a point where I said, you know what, I don't give a shit whether he's in or out. And but then in later years, when baseball itself is knee-deep involved in gambling, and I think back at when I was a kid at Yankee Stadium, and the most visible sign in all of Yankee Stadium was his huge no betting sign on the center field scoreboard. No betting. And now people are sitting in the box seats with a cell phone in their hand, betting on what the next pitch is going to be.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm saying to myself, enough with Pete Rose. I mean, baseball has no right to be keeping this guy out of, at least keeping him ineligible when they're in bed with knee deep involved with gambling now. So that's my feeling about that. If he is reinstated and he's on the ballot, I hope he gets elected.
And he'll be delighted. Oh, wait a minute, he's dead.
Right.
The posthumous.
And my other argument about Pete Rose was what differs him, in my opinion, from the Steroids guys is they cheated. Pete Rose never cheated the game. He just bet.
Yeah.
He never cheated the game. He didn't do it, and there's a big difference.
Yeah, look, Leo DeRocher, they did the same thing with him. They waited till he died.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. How about Marvin Miller?
Yeah.
They made sure he wasn't around to accept his.
Well, it's interesting you brought up, and I don't know the answer to the question, but what's Trump's interest in Pete Rose all of a sudden? Where does that come from?
He got a call from Rose's lawyers. His lawyer called him and asked him if he would consider it, and all he did was basically all the lawyers wanted is that Trump would pardon him. And whether you're Trump, whether you're whoever, I mean, pardoning Pete Rose, he's dead now. You're gonna pardon? To me, that's a no-brainer. You know what he would be pardoned for? Tax evasion. That's what his felony conviction is, for tax evasion. It's not like he murdered somebody.
Yeah.
Tax evasion. We're all guilty of that.
Well, not me. Honest to God, really.
And so for Trump, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But he's not going to pardon him. I don't know which comes first, the horse or the chariot. But if he does pardon him, then Manfred's really got a situation where he's going to almost have to reinstate him.
Let me just say
right now, Rose is a convicted felon, and that's what the Hall of Fame Board of Directors was arguing. He's a convicted felon. We have to keep him on the suspended list.
I was just going to say about Bonds what I said about him. He was the most despicable guy at the park. Away from the park, especially you see him now, he's really kind of a delightful guy. But at the park, and the way he treated people was number one among all the bad people in sports.
Yeah,
very very unlikable guy.
Yep, I would certainly agree with that.
Yeah.
Boy. And that's the other thing. Rose was likable. I mean, he was a writer's best friend. I mean,
I remember interviewing him. I was a young kid, just starting out, and I just said, "Hey, Pete, have you got a few minutes?" He gave me like a half an hour. He had no idea who I was. It was delightful.
There's a story in my book, Marty. I don't know if you've read this story, but my first World Series was 1975, and Milton Richmond was my boss, and he took me. I was one of the guys he took to the World Series that year, and then we get to Game 6, and Milton's divvying up assignments, and he gave me the losers clubhouse. So that was my assignment that night because I was a low man on the totem pole. So anyway, the game goes on. Then Fisk hits the home run to win the game, or whatever it was, 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever it was. So I'm running out of the press box, and I'm getting on the elevator, and I feel Milton grabs me by the shoulder, and he says to me, "Billy, don't fuck up down there." Reassuring words to the rookie sports writer from my boss. So now I get down there and I rush. I was the first guy into the Reds clubhouse. And lo and behold, there is Pete Rose. He's standing on top of a trainer's table and he's saying, "Wow, was that some game today? What a game tonight. That was the greatest game I've ever been in." I was talking to Rick Burleson in the 7th inning. I said to him, "Do you believe what a great game this is?" And I said, "Holy shit, I fucked up. I'm in the wrong clubhouse."
That's great.
But that was Rose.
Yeah,
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think Tom Seaver would feel today about what's going on with Hall of Famers and everything else? Because he was sort of a hardliner.
Well, he was heartbroken at the end of what they'd done to starting pitchers. I mean, he was. I interviewed him a couple of times towards the end of his life when I went out to the vineyard, because I would go out there to get his tutelage on wines, and we would wind up getting a tutelage on starting pitching. He'd go off on his rants about what they've done to him. He says they won't let these kids out of the corral now, and it's just terrible what they've done. And he would really be upset now, because it was getting bad then, but now 5 innings and you're out of the game, and it's considered a good game if you made it through 5 innings, and if you made it through 6, wow, and
it's the new stat, quality start.
I think this may sound like an exaggeration, but I don't think it is. I think part of what Tom Seaver died of was a broken heart. What happened to what baseball did to pitchers.
Yeah,
I believe it. Yeah, Mike Kirko used to say, if you only went 5 innings, you were 5 and fly guy. What the hell? Get out of here. You're not worth nothing. What, you only went 5? Really?
Right.
Yeah. 5
Well,
and get a cab.
Don Sutton made it to the Hall of Fame with that.
Well,
he pitched for 30 years too.
Well,
he also pitched a lot of complete games. I remember we were having a conversation with the committee I was on at Cooperstown. Every other year, we'd go up there to vote on people to put on the Veterans Committee ballots. And one of the guys on the committee was Mark Wicker. I'm sure Bruce knows him very well.
Orange County.
We were talking about different eligible players to put on the ballot for the Veterans Committee, and Burt Blyleven's name came up. And I always thought of Burt Blyleven as a guy that pitched just good enough to lose. I think he has a record maybe for the most 1-0 losses. I'm not sure. But anyway, we were talking about Blyleven, and I said, well, he certainly should be on this ballot, but as far as a Hall of Famer, I'm not sure. And so Wicker looked at me and he said, take a look at this. And he's pointing to his record, and under shutouts was the number 60. 60 shutouts. And I looked at that and I said, wow, can you imagine that? We're going to be electing people now with no shutouts to the Hall of Fame.
that's right.
And this is a guy who had 60 shutouts. I think that's 4th on the all-time list. I'm not sure.
There you go.
Well, the other stat that's gone away is complete games. I mean, geez.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Well, is it 4 now? Somebody had 5 last year, I think, had 4 or 5 complete games. 5 complete games. Unbelievable. It's just
Bruce and I every Sunday look at we look at the league leaders because we like the Sunday paper, where you can see all the league leaders. So we do it every Sunday
now, but
we do it every Sunday together. At least we look at the top 5 or 6.
Right.
And last year there were, Bruce, what was it? Two hitters in the league hit 300. Something ridiculous.
7 guys. If you go by the 502 plate appearances thing, 7 guys hit over 300. 7. One of them was Johnny, interestingly, but
Yeah.
This year, early on, I think a week ago, there were 33 guys over 300, but that's not going to last.
Yeah.
You never know. Baseball is a cyclical game. I mean, Goldschmidt, what did he hit last couple of years? Under 300, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And now he's hitting 356. So it's
And how about
Go
Aaron
figure.
Judge is hitting 415?
yeah, right. I know.
Yeah.
And the little second baseman from Milwaukee slaps the ball around too.
Terang.
Yeah, he's got.
Yeah.
I think he's got a. He can't catch the ball. You hit the ball to him, forget it. There's no. The Brewers lost 2 games because of that guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
he
It's
cannot-
true.
He can't catch anything. In fact, the whole team stinks. They
Yeah.
can't do anything right.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So we'll see. Well, today, first of all, Bill, we love having you on.
Thanks,
this
Marty.
is what baseball's all about. We could talk for another hour, but let me hold the book up again. It's put out by Triumph, and on our comments section, Ryan put the link and how you can get the book. It's a baseball memoir by Bill Madden. Yankees, typewriters, scandals, and Cooperstown. I think we covered all of it.
Yeah, pretty
But-
much.
But
Nick
it's
Chubb's
all
not in there, but he's
it's all in there, and it's really good because it's you. And like I said, I didn't know a lot of these things, and you and I have talked for 30 years about Mays and Cepeda and so many different parts of baseball history. And I really didn't know a lot of these things that are in the book. So it's really, I think, terrific. I think it's good. So I'm really happy to have you on with us.
Thanks, Marty. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this is good.
It's always good to see my good friend Bruce.
It's not about war. It's about the humanity. Long live the humanity in sports writing. And Billy is a champ.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Bill, you're still writing, aren't you?
Yeah, I read a column a week for the Daily News. I feel like sometimes I'm writing into a vacuum because that same newspaper where George Steinbrenner respected me because I had 2 million readers is probably now down to about 4,000 readers of the paper. And my column online has a paywall in front of it. So
Oh, jeez. Come
I'm
on.
still
That's
writing, but I
that's
don't know-
crazy.
I don't know how many people are reading me.
Billy, do you still
That's-
go to Elaine's? You still go to Elaine's?
Elaine's is gone.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She died about 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
We used to love to have drinks together, Billy and I. And once he said, "Come on down to Elaine's," I'd heard about it. I go in there, and immediately you go in there, you know if you would belong in there or not. It's a very,
right.
very interesting crowd, erudite crowd, interesting people. And Billy was a regular. That's all I needed to know. I don't know if I
Yeah.
was. He sure was.
Did you ever
My-
Bill, I know you did. Bruce or Tony, did you guys go to Toot Shores at all in New York?
Oh, sure. I've been there many times. Many times.
I went there
I
once.
was a young guy then, so I was just there to kind of drink and absorb the atmosphere of it. The other place that I loved in later part of my life and career was the 21 Club. I loved the 21 Club, just the snottiness of it,
Right. Well, there's a story in my book, Marty, about my I think it was my first experience in Toot Shores. It was my first day on the job for UPI. I almost got fired by getting drunk in Toot Shores. You gotta read the book.
Oh yeah, no, I read
Absolutely.
that. They told you didn't have a deadline.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, was that the Jackie Robinson story?
Yeah, that was a Jackie Robinson story with Fred McMahon, who was a dear friend of mine. He was one of my mentors at UPI as well. He's retired now, living out in Los Angeles. Yeah, and I was assigned to this press conference at Tavern on the Green. It was called Black is Beautiful, and it was at the time this Black is Beautiful was a kind of a it was a symbolism for Black America and just the times that it was. And they honored all these different people. And on this particular press conference, they had Jackie Robinson as their featured speaker. So that's why they sent me over to cover it. And so I go over to Tavern on the Green, and I immediately ran into Fred McMain, who was the senior baseball writer at UPI at the time. He said, I'm only here because he's a lifelong Dodger fan. He said, I'm only here because there's a chance to meet Jackie. I'm really excited about this. And we were standing in the parking lot of Tavern on the Green. And we see this figure coming across the parking lot, this withered old man with white hair. And Freddie looks at me and says, oh, my God, that's him. And he was, I forget what year it was. I think it might have been 72 because he wasn't alive very much longer after that.
Right.
Anyway, we go into this press conference, and immediately there's all these little bar tables set up all over the place. And Freddie says, let's get a drink. So I ordered a drink, and of course, everything was comped in the place. And we wound up having 3 or 4 gin and tonics. And then they had the press conference, and I'm writing down everything that Jackie said and taking notes. And I start heading back to the office after it was over. And Freddie says, where are you going? I said, I got to get back to the office and write the story up. He says, don't worry about it. They don't need this story anytime soon. Let's go over to Toots Shores and have a pop. So Freddie takes me over to Toots Shores, and we were there for, I don't know, another hour or so. And I had many drinks, and I finally went back to the office, and the assistant sports editor was furious at me. He said, where have you been all day? And I said, well, I was with Fred McMain. And I realized right away that was not exactly a good excuse.
Out here, it'd be like saying, yeah, I was with Jack Smith. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, my God.
So I was later told that they've never seen this guy as mad as he was about this rookie writer who has disappeared for the afternoon. And I said, this is just great. My first day on the job, I almost got fired at UPI.
Very good.
Fabulous book. Fabulous
Great.
book. Fabulous stories. Bill, it's great.
Great
Bill
job.
Madden.
Great job.
Bill, thank you so much.
Okay, Marty. Thank you. Good to see
All
you,
right.
Brucey.
Bill, very nice meeting you.
Okay.
All right. Boy,
Nice
that's
meeting-
good. How about that?
That's great. That was really great, Marty.
Come on. Is that what baseball's all about?
Yeah, that's really great.
The book is just tremendous. There's all kinds of great stories, and it's just, again, it's all about the people, and that's what makes the game great.
So you've read it already, Bruce?
Well, I got it, and I immediately told Bill that I just can't get around to books. I got 17 of them stacked up over there. I read all day, but it's stuff off the internet and stuff like that. And now I hear it's going on. Now I can't find the book. I finally found kind of hurried through it yesterday just so I could talk to Bill about it. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read a lot of it, and enough to highly recommend it.
It's right up well, he's writing it, it seems like, for our age as well. No, or yes?
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. And that's the experience that he has.
Right.
It's teaching what baseball was and what relationships were in those, the Frank McGuire story. That you could work with someone from New York and immediately be taken in. Come on, Bill Madden was a sprinter. Who knew that?
Yeah.
You know,
you said you read 109. Good grief.
He goes to South Carolina.
Yeah.
But I
think.
Wait,
and did he say that he ran the 109.8? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that's Olympic time.
That's a blaze.
Yeah, really.
I mean, at the time.
Yeah, at the time especially.
So you learn about a period of sports writing and just of history of relationships with people when things like that could happen.
Yeah.
When your word meant something, that's that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good lesson for people. So I like the book. I like the stories.
Great.
I like the stories in there. They're pretty good. So, all right. So last question, Lamont Wade, what are we going to do with him?
What the hell? Bruce, jump in on this. Will you? 0.92, please.
Where's Pete Alonso? God, that would have been nice.
We asked him all winter, right? All winter. Yes.
Alonso gets a huge 2 or 3 hits every night. He's just going off, and I'm outside of when Lamont became late night Lamont. I've never been a big fan of his. I mean, you can draw all the walks you want. He's not a good hitter, and
No.
you need more than that at first base. Just period. And we'll pray for Bryce Eldridge to hurry through the minors.
Yeah. I think he's in the end going to be our answer because it's not VR. That's for sure. You know, that other night he could, jeez.
For that alone, he's Kerrang out there.
Yeah, and he can't.
What do you do? I mean, Wade, he's going to be close to. He's only got 60 at bats, something like that, because they bench him every once in a while against a lefty. But do you just stay? I guess it's like Bailey. You know, there are certain parts of this lineup. You know, I think you throw a good pitcher out there every day. Hicks notwithstanding. Every day, like Roop today against Myers, I think the Giants will be in that game.
Yeah.
And once you get the bullpen in, this Tyler Rogers may be the greatest 8th inning guy in the history of baseball.
Oh, that's for sure.
I mean,
every time they bring him out, I don't know about you guys, but every time they bring him out, I'm always been like, oh, please, really? But you know what? He gets through them.
3 ground balls to second, and it's over.
Yeah. You know what they're doing though with the lineup when we're talking about Bailey and Wade is that they've got there's stability to the lineup. There's not a shuttle to Sacramento every Tuesday.
Right.
They've got their guys. They're doing well, and they're going to stick with their guys. We're going to have Wade. Okay, you don't replace him. Maybe if things go sour in a different way, I mean, you don't rule out replacing him. I just like the stability of the team, that Melvin's managing the team the way he wants to do it. Nobody's getting in his way, and I think that's the bottom line to it.
And you know, I think you got to give a lot of credit to Buster on this because that was his deal as well.
Buster, on Yaz, I must have driven Yaz out of town on Marty's show once a week. Yeah, in a nice way. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
You don't have a 230 hitter in right field. Well, Buster believed in him, and he's a different guy this year.
Yes, he is.
That throw was beautiful last night.
Oh, the throw. Well, he's always been a nice defensive player.
Yeah,
but he's hitting. He's a different guy at the plate, and if you're going to get that, he's okay.
Well, I guess you just wait. You wait. Adames has got 100 at bats. He's got
he'll be fine.
20 hits. He's hitting the ball a little bit better lately.
Yeah.
How many 3-run homers did Adames hit last year? It's some frightening. 13 3-run homers?
Yeah.
In one season? Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the stat the other day. They flashed it.
Yeah, and I don't think he hasn't gotten one this year yet.
No.
One. No homers?
One. Yeah, one. Sorry.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be fine. I've liked him all.
Yeah.
I think as long as the bullpen is okay, and there's Eric Miller.
Which we thought it was. They
need another lefty out there.
Yeah, Birdsong and him. As long as the bullpen's okay and the starting pitcher kind of does what they do. And today we got Roop going today and Tobias Myers. So as I say, Roop's going to be in it.
Yeah,
I would think. So I guess play it, just play it out. Don't make any moves. Don't do anything dramatic. Arizona's a mess. They don't know what's going on. Corbin Carroll's going wild. San Diego's banged up now. And the Dodgers, who knows? So what the heck? It's all going to be in the division anyway. It's all the 52 games in the division will decide this whole deal.
Yeah.
And looking forward to seeing, I want to see some divisional play. I mean, what is this? April 24th and not one divisional game yet.
This has been a long month, that this feels like August 24th.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when you start out Cincinnati and Houston. What happened to Dodgers and San Diego? But no,
right.
You're right. It's going to come.
Well, we got Texas this weekend, and it's Brandon Crawford Day on Saturday. So I'm glad he's getting his day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
this is good. All right. Well, that's our show. That's what we do. This is great.
Well,
I
this
think
was great. I want to thank Marty a lot, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity for Bruce and I to talk. I send Bruce a bunch of congratulatory emails every time he writes a column, it seems.
I say
And one thing I will say, Bruce, is that you always write me back. You know,
Yeah.
so
I write you
know,
back and save them.
yeah, and I didn't expect it, but you always send me a little quick note back, so I appreciate that. So
Come on,
thank you.
KNBR. Of course, I'm going to acknowledge.
Yeah.
all right. Bruce, Warriors in any trouble here? They look pretty good.
Well, only if Butler can't play. They're in massive
Right.
trouble. He has to come back all the way, 100%. And they have a chance. I think they will win it. But that's kind of what it boils down to. Without him, it's a completely different team. It's the team we saw before he got there.
Yeah, exactly. That's I was thinking the same thing, Bruce. I thought, well, this is the team, that lineup that Kerr had to put in there, and I'm thinking, my initials, who are these people?
We don't need too much Post or Santos. They're endearing fellows, but please,
Right.
It's full of like tremendous athletes. I mean, like really great athletes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll enjoy. All right, we'll do this again. This
Yeah,
is
All right.
Yeah, this is really solid. I'm happy we could do it. So, Tony, Bruce, thank you.
Eric,
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for dealing with old people and technology, Ryan. Thank you.
any old people show, have me on for sure. I can call.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Take care,
Great
everyone.
to see you guys.
All right. Take
Yeah.
care.
Right.